After moving to Madison in 1990, I started working at Smart soon after as a paid intern, but learning about engineering from Butch, Steve, Doug Olson, numerous other engineers that were there in the early 90s. So when it closed, I think like the rest of Madison, we were all really touched and really affected by that. So I contacted these guys. I said, why don't we, shoot some keepsake interviews with locals to see what the closing meant to them. And that was the springboard for 6 years of work that really sort of targets the history of Smart, the history of Butch and Steve, but also independent music in the Midwest and what it meant to people.
Well, Madison was a college town, and still is, but that always seems to attract a lot of people who want to do creative things and maybe don't really want to get jobs.
Like us.
I know we didn't. We really just wanted a place we could hang out with our friends and roll tape, and that kind of developed into a little music scene that ended up getting bigger and bigger. And
we were the two stupidest businessmen on the planet. There was no plan at all. We just wanted to have a place to hang out, and luckily we ended up having some great people who ran the studio. Mike Zirkle was our manager for many years, and he actually kept it functioning, because we couldn't comprehend how to do that. But we would work until like midnight or 1. We'd do a session for 12 or 13 hours. We would go out to like the Crystal Corner local bar, have a few beers and go, what should we do? Let's go back to the studio. I mean, you'd think we would go home, right? Those early recordings were done quickly and crudely, sort of out of necessity. A lot of the bands had no money. They'd get a reel of tape and say, hey, can we come in and record on Friday? We'd go, sure. And so we would record like 10 songs all in a day, and then maybe if they had a little bit of cash, like $50 or $100, they'd come back the next day and we'd mix it all in 8 or 10 hours. And then it would be done. They'd walk out, and then they'd press up a record. And the gear that Steve and I had, we would go to like churches and schools and knock on their door and say, hey, do you have any microphones or anything in back? And buy like a box of stuff and cables for like $50. And I have never really felt elitist about having to work in a world-class studio. I have to have Neumann microphones. I mean, of course I love to have those, but even in garbage to this day, we still have a pretty gung-ho mentality. We'll just, if Steve's playing a guitar part and there's a mic on in the room, we'll just go, turn that mic on, let's record it right now. We don't really get too fussy with spending hours and hours of trying to get the perfect sound. Sometimes we do, but a lot of the time it's just do it by the seat of your pants and get it done as quick as you can. Well, we still have a couple Roland Space Echoes. One is the one that we had 30 years ago. We use them on the garbage record still. I still like the sound of what that does because it's unpredictable. When that tape is running through those, the capstans are running it through, it's not always, you can hear it flutter, and every now and then the tape is so worn out it loses the high end, and it's kind of a magical box, and we still use that. So yeah, we still have a plate echo, plate reverb that we had there. And I think it was a late 50s Fender Bassman, and Mr. Colson,
great.
Doug Olson, our engineer there, I don't know what he did to it, but it sounded killer. And it was just a head, and we ran that into, I think, a Marshall cabinet that we got the ohms set up right, so the overload was good on it. And bands like Tad would come in and they'd start playing their guitars and go, why don't you check out the Bassman? They'd always go, not really. And they'd plug in and go, holy shit, just turn it up. You didn't have to do anything to it. God, we used it was on literally almost every session for about a 3 or 4 year period that we did.
And then it died. Somebody tried to fix it and it never sounded the same. So.
Yeah, we're going to make it sound better, and they effed it up, and then this never sounded the same.
Yeah. Well, Butch and I kind of met at electronic music class at the UW, and it was awesome. They had walls of like analog Moogs, and that's where we learned how to cut tape, and that was the only way you could fix something at the time, was taking a razor blade and cutting the tape. And I guess knowing how to do that, it affects your thought process a little bit, and how important it is to, especially today when you can just plug anything into a computer and it sounds pretty good without a lot of work.
I think that was some of the value of all, the crew at Smart Studios was, working with these engineers, was working with somebody who was so committed to the craft of engineering. I mean, it was like carpentry, and the more you did it, the more enriched your work became. But I think that that's something that was so connected to the Smart experience. I mean, it was how records were made, but it was also how people were connecting, with each other.
I really do consider myself a studio rat first and foremost. If I had to pick only one thing, that's probably what I would want to do. But for us, it's really second nature.
No, I feel like the film that is being screened now, that we're releasing now, it's a 90-minute version of a history that lasted over 3 decades. I still feel like this film just is peeling back the first layer of many layers about this part of the country and the approach that people took to preserving their art.
For us, it's smart initially. It meant just trying to figure things out on your own, kind of by the seat of your pants, because we never went to any formal recording schools. I think that the whole DIY, it's how Wendy made the film too. It was done very guerrilla style. It was much like Smart, just kind of hunkered down in your little production studio, just working on the film. And
even the sort of lo-fi approach to production that was organic to me, because that's what I knew about production. I think that it made the film and the interviews a bit more accessible. So things weren't beautifully lit and it wasn't HD. And that worked with the VHS footage that I was using from the 80s, or the way flyers looked, or old photographs. So it came together in a way where nothing was too pristine, else it actually stuck out, other than the music. But also there's, between all of us, probably 100 years of experience, with just getting things done in a way that works for what we're trying to share with people, not only our friends, but, to sort of bring on new people to an idea or a product or a film that we have. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time.